representative young people or the women that he appointed as very high officials in the Vatican. I would have put them at the front alongside the priests. But I think now the Pope, the coffin, while it's taking the coffin through Rome, we can see all the gratitude and the cheers, and I think this is what he deserves, to be even in death, to be cheered and to be among his people. That was what he wanted, not to be one for them, but within them.
Augusto Zampini Davis joining us there from Buenos Aires. We appreciate your time as we listen, Alistair Bruce, to the applause through the streets of Rome.
It's such a respectful and gentle way in which people like to connect with a moment, and we felt it in the Mass too, and it's just natural, and he is among people who have felt led by him in whatever way they saw his leadership offering, and he's leaving now at the end of a life of service which was so beautifully described by one in Argentina who knows exactly from whence Pope Francis came.
And the route heading towards a major crossroads in Rome, the Piazza Venezia, and then heading south east towards the famous Roman Colosseum, another indicator of the history of this day.
And a place to which popes regularly come to reflect upon the sacrifice of Christians in a sport of performance that took place in ancient Rome. And, you know, much of that reflected on and taken into account as, you know, everybody in their own way responding to this moment, some running obviously to keep up, and this amazing yellow tape that they've placed everywhere to stop people parking their cars and to prepare the streets of Rome for this remarkable send-off, this conveying of a pope to a separate place from St. Peter's, which is where so many of them have been laid to rest. But interestingly, St. Peter's was built in the time of Paul V, and Paul V is buried also in St. Maria Maggiore, and right next to the place where Pope Francis will be laid to rest, beside his beloved picture of Mary, the mother of Christ. And she will undoubtedly, from that ancient icon, look down upon this good and faithful servant.
A police officer or soldier deployed every 10 metres on the route. We're hearing from Italy's Interior Ministry. 5 police helicopters patrolling Rome sky. They've taken security extremely seriously, not surprising with the delegates from across the world. That meeting between Donald Trump and President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine taking place inside St. Peter's Basilica quite extraordinarily on the day of the Pope's funeral, a man who really took focus of peace and the war.
Passing the great memorial to Victor Emmanuel II, who was the focus during the Risorgimento, the reunification of Italy in the 1800s. It's such a massive item at the heart of this great city itself. Almost seems out of place sometimes, with its own altar to the land and to those who gave their lives for that period of reunion of Italy. And I think for Pope Francis, he sought a reunion of the world, and that's how he invested his effort as a religious leader, to try and convince people in the way that at the Mass, the bread and wine, which became the body and blood of Christ and was shared for the last time around Pope Francis. It is the central tenet of the faith that he held and that he has given such an example for as he is conveyed towards the place of his final rest.
And the Vatican has said that 40 people holding white roses will form a guard of honour. Well, there we have the unbelievable Colosseum. Anyone who's been to Rome will know it well. Real crowds around the Colosseum. I was speaking to the Archbishop of Westminster about this. Cardinal Vincent Nichols, who suggested it was the martyrs in the Colosseum which would have attracted Pope Francis. The gladiators who fought, the enslaved who fought for the entertainment of the crowd in Roman times. Those taking a high point in the upper arches of the Colosseum, looking down at the crowds, the view of Pope Francis's coffin, sealed only last night in that Pope-mobile, which helped him meet the crowds as he would want to do.
Every city has different parts in which different parts of society live, and the thing about Santa Maria Maggiore is it's right next to the railway station. It's a bit of a tough area of Rome. It's where those who are having a tougher time live, and of course, again, you know, this was where Pope Francis felt best. And you know, he went in the last week of his life during Holy Week to visit the prisoners nearby, and he said to them all, "I wish I could change my place with you." It was just a constant capacity within his heart, bolstered by his faith, to find the most dispossessed and those at the bottom of their life and lift them up and make them understand that in his faith they could find joy and encouragement.
Those ancient Roman walls have lived through history. Pope Francis telling his doctor at the weekend his last regret was that he was not able to bathe the feet of the prisoners that he saw on Maundy Thursday. He did it in the first year of his papacy, including 2 women, 1 a Muslim, showing how this Pope broke with tradition. The basilica where he is heading to now, one of 4 papal basilicas in Rome, its structure dating back to the year 434, its core intact, though of course undergoing several rounds of restoration. The basilica home to that famous icon, the Salus Populi Romani, which Pope Francis has often visited to pray, sitting there before and after his travels. It is there he returned after being hospitalized with double pneumonia. It is a sacred place of Marian devotion, and of course, Alistair, he was a Jesuit by tradition. What difference would that have made to the way he was pontiff?
Well, the Society of Jesus, which is the name of the Jesuits, is a committed group of priests who will serve to their very end the direction they're given by the leadership of the church. And it was almost surprising that a Jesuit should be chosen to be that leader. And he always took the martyrdom of the saints, and particularly the leadership of Ignatius, the saint who had created the Society of Jesus, as a guide, and used it to encourage and infuse the evangelism of the work done by those priests under his leadership. I mean, he became a Jesuit and was almost immediately made the leader of his area as the leading Jesuit. And because rules were the guide of it, it was interesting that he found that leadership and delivered it on the streets in Buenos Aires, in the toughest areas of that city, amongst people who desperately needed someone to care for them. And he and his team of Jesuit priests did their best to push against the relentlessness of poverty and the endlessness of the challenges that the people he worked amongst faced. And it didn't tire him, it made him joyous. And he constantly advocated for the joy and the hope that is in the idea of the gospel and the work of the gospel and how it affects people in their daily lives. Not everybody is caught into the religious way. Not everyone who he gave his time to was in any way religious, and yet he managed throughout his devotion to service as a Jesuit and as a Jesuit pope to do his best and to provide an example.
So soon approaching the Basilica of Santa Maria Maggiore, to be met by 40 people holding white roses who will form an honour guard for Pope Francis on the steps to welcome his coffin for its burial. Among them, we're told, the poor, the homeless, prisoners, migrants. The white roses, a return to the idea of legendary snowfall that occurred during the dedication of the Basilica. According to the legend, a snowstorm occurred on a summer's day, and the Blessed Virgin Mary appeared to Pope Liberius, directing him to build a church on that spot, which became Santa Maria Maggiore. It is a day commemorated by releasing white rose petals from the dome during liturgy. The white roses symbolising purity and the Virgin Mary's role in the event, making it a significant Marian devotion. Father Robert Sirico joins us once again as we watch the crowds in Rome applauding their Pope.
Well, he's the Bishop of Rome. And this is very dramatic. As I mentioned, I had been to, now this is my third papal funeral, but this, I've never seen this scene before, that the body of a pope should be brought through the streets that he governed, in effect, as the Bishop of Rome, and to see the number of people just greeting him. And of course that, I think it's mostly an Italian tradition to applaud the body, which I hadn't seen until I saw it at John Paul II's funeral, and I found it so inspiring. If he had told me about it, I thought it would be insulting, but it was so inspiring to say, you know, good work, thank you.
And we've been discussing why he chose the Basilica of Santa Maria Maggiore, which it is approaching now.
Yes, you described it very well. You know, in the chapel, as I understand where he's been interred, I've celebrated Mass at that altar, and it has, if I'm not mistaken, the largest single whole piece of lapis lazuli in the world. You face the altar, because it's blue, which is the Virgin Mary's color, and you face this wall of lapis lazuli, and it's really magnificent. I mean, I have one pair of cufflinks that have some lapis in it, but to see a whole wall of it is remarkable.
And indeed, so it is said, the manger, part of the manger, a relic of the manger that Jesus was born in.
It is very much a part of the Roman Catholic faith to find objects that are venerated because of their tradition, and it is to this great place that the Pope now comes. His final wish is to be fulfilled by his loving church. The bearer party that has so carefully looked after the late Pope from the very beginning of this process of his obsequies, now about to play their last responsibility to the Pope and to take him to his place of entombment. On the coffin we can see the simple cross, and below it the coat of arms that he adopted, with at its centre the bursting sun, which is the symbol of the Jesuits. Again, the Master of Ceremonies, Archbishop Diego Ravelli, taking responsibility for the process right to the very end, and travelling with those, the cardinals, who will take him towards the icon that he loved so much, that was presented to his predecessor in the year 593.
So the white rose is held, the symbol of the purity of Mary. Those who worked with the Vatican, specifically chosen. Those in need, helped by Pope Francis and always in his mind.
Travelling with the late Holy Father, cardinals now wearing choir dress, and also some members of his family who have come to see off this august member of the Bergoglios at the conclusion of his papacy. The entombment will be a private event, and it will be a chance for those closest to him to see him to his final resting place. But inside St. Maria Maggiore will be the final part of this blessing at the end of the life. And it is itself a remarkable basilica. And it holds, like so many of them do, so much art to emphasize the beauty of the promise of heaven. The bell rings out to call Pope Francis home. And as a priest, he is carried into the church, head first, as though if he was stood, he could celebrate the Mass. As the procession moves in and the coffin is conveyed, inscribed on the coffin itself the motto that Pope Francis chose, Miserando atque elegendo, meaning lowly but chosen. Francis, from the world you've served, as the Pope leaves sight of this earthly world and makes his way to his final entombment. Beside that remarkable icon of the Virgin Mary, so adored by Romans since the year 593, and to which Pope Francis always came to make oblation, most recently after he left hospital. It is the final request he made, that he should be laid to rest under the gaze of Mary and Christ child.
Passing beneath the famous gilded coffered ceiling. Passing beneath the gilded coffered ceiling. Seen by thousands this week, this now a place of pilgrimage for so many, as those white roses are laid beneath the icon.
Held now, but above the coffin, the icon to which he came so regularly during his pontificate, to lay before the Virgin Mary and the Christ child all his hopes and aspirations of leadership and service in Christ. And now to his resting place.
Pope Francis's tomb has been made with materials from the Italian region of Liguria, the land of his grandparents. In the small town of Cogone, a plaque of slate commemorates Jorge Bergoglio's great-grandfather, Vincenzo Sivori. He travelled from Italy to Argentina in the 1800s, there raising his family, including his granddaughter, Regina Maria Sivori, Pope Francis's mother.
And I sense that at this time we will probably leave this private ceremony of entombment here in the Basilica Santa Maria Maggiore, but ever watching and ever present. And for those Christians who know this basilica and this icon, our thoughts are with those who see this final act of respect and reverence to Pope Francis.
Father Robert Sirica, you've been watching these pictures once again.
It's
Beautiful
amazing.
scenes.
They are beautiful scenes. You know, what strikes me, though, is I guess you can't have a simple funeral if you're the Pope. It's just not possible because, I mean, just the beauty of the buildings and the music and the presence of so many cardinals and then, of course, the faithful who want to pay their homage to him and, in effect, thank God for his life. It makes it difficult to have a very simple funeral. But I think the symbol of the people who were greeting him as he came in with the roses, I'm told that there were, you know, among that group, people who were very marginalized and whose lives had been very difficult. But he wanted their presence there to symbolize that connection with the poor and the vulnerable.
Well, indeed, we see those significant changes. The single coffin, the procession, the chosen site of burial. It speaks to the man and the Pope he wanted to be and was.
That's certainly the case. And then under the mantle, in effect, of the Blessed Mother, who he loved so dearly.
I'm going to predict that because we listen to the Litany of the Saints as part of the funeral mass, that it won't be a great deal of time before there is a move in the Roman Catholic Church to first beatify and in due course perhaps to canonize Pope Francis as a saint amongst the number of saints. And I think that I'm going to guess again that the area in which for the faithful Pope Francis in death is likely to qualify, it will be in the area of what he does for somebody who perhaps right now is in this city, who is destitute, who has nothing, is lying in a gutter and is seeking the understanding of a world, or someone who is right now in fear of life and traveling across the world from one country to a place of rest and safety and security. It is in those people that the wondrousness of what might be in the heart and soul and spirit and capability of Pope Francis that may in due course find him ultimately and perfectly raised to the number of the saints.
Well, Francis Campbell, former UK ambassador to the Holy See, can join us now. Your reflections on what you have seen so far this morning?
A very moving Requiem Mass for Pope Francis, and I thought that Cardinal Giambattista Re spoke beautifully. He summed them up perfectly. I think the images that we're seeing coming out of St. Peter's with Presidents Zelensky and Trump sitting down on two chairs facing each other in the Basilica just before the Pope's Requiem Mass, I think sums up everything about peace that Pope Francis would like to have achieved in that dreadful conflict in Ukraine. So I think those images chime very well with what Cardinal Re spoke about the Pope and how he summed them up.
And indeed, there was applause from those gathered in St. Peter's Square. The discussion of war, a painful and tragic defeat for everyone, is how he described it, reminding us that Pope Francis would always say, we are all part of the same human family. And this gathering of world leaders, as you say, amidst war, tariff war, pinch points of geopolitics, you know, that moment of those leaders sitting down and discussions with the French president and the UK Prime Minister would be exactly what Pope Francis would want to see today.
That is correct, Anna. A wonderful gathering around a funeral where you remember someone who gave a life of service, and you also remember the 12 years of his papacy, but also to see the sign of peace being extended. And there is an image, one of the photographs of the funeral, and you can see President Trump and Melania sitting in the front row, and 3 rows behind is the representatives of Iran, including a Shia cleric. And again, this convening power of the papacy and of this funeral and bringing together people that might not otherwise talk, that might not otherwise extend a hand of friendship, but do so in the context of faith and witness.
We spoke earlier to an Argentine priest from Argentina who said there were 3 Ps that were critical to Pope Francis: the periphery, the people, and the planet. What did he achieve on those scores, do you think? How much did he throw them into focus during his papacy?
Well, I think, Anna, he brought the papacy out to parts of the world, especially parts of the world where Catholics and Christians are very much in a minority. He also built on the work of Pope Benedict in relation to climate change and addressing the environment. And I think in terms of the people, he had his own unique style, as Cardinal Ray talked about his heart. And I think at the heart of what he did was very much bringing the message of the gospel into places where perhaps it's unpopular. He spoke truth to power on many occasions, and he reached out to the dispossessed. And indeed, where he is now being buried is a church I know very well. It was my parish church in Rome when I lived there. And of the papal basilicas, of the 4 papal basilicas in Rome, it's very much the one for the people. It's beside Rome's main train station. It's where you go for confession. It's where you go for hourly mass. So it's very much a place where he will be very, very close to the people and his final resting place. And it's very apt as well, because it's also the papal basilica that really comes under connection to Spain and the Spanish speakers. And I think it's something, in the way you sum it up, it's the 3 Ps. I would probably add a 4th and say that he was prophetic to the age in speaking out, especially about marginalized groups and about unpopular issues of the age and the day.
And will that live on? We know he appointed a large number of cardinals. We have 9 days of official mourning. The focus then shifts to the conclave. Will we see a Pope Francis-like successor?
So I think it's important, Anna, that we distinguish between the holder of the office and the office. And he was the 266th Pope, a very strong personality, very much like St. Pope John Paul II. And often in the history of the papacy, following a strong personality, sometimes the church goes for perhaps a more introspective period. And I think ultimately the cardinals will make a choice, the 135 who have the vote. They will make a choice perhaps about a degree of continuity, but perhaps a degree also to allow the next Pope the space and the time to see things and to discern things as they see the will of God for the age in which they live.
Do you have a name?
Anna, I think it would be foolish for anyone to put forward a name. I think of the 135, there's always scope for a surprise. There's probably 6 or 7, what you might say, eligible candidates that would have the faith, the skills, the graces to do the job. It's a tough job for somebody, especially at an advanced age, in ministering to a church that touches close to 20% of the world's population. You've lots of friends, you've lots of critics, and I just pray as a Catholic that whoever is selected is given our prayer support and has the grace to be able to fulfill what is a very difficult leadership role in the church.
Francis Campbell, former UK ambassador to the Holy See. Thank you very much indeed. Father Robert Sirica, we're about to lose you.
Yes.
I was talking about potential candidates, whether you have someone in mind.
Francis.
He wouldn't say. He thought there were 6-ish.
No, of course not. He's a diplomat.
Yes.
I would agree with that. I think 6-ish. I think it's not like there is one right now. These 9 days are going to kind of crystallize. I think the one point to keep in mind is that even though Francis has appointed 80% of the voting cardinals, nonetheless, these are people who don't know each other and who don't know the Vatican, some of them who are coming in. So it really is up for grabs, as it were. I think there are about 6 or 10 who you could focus on. It's going to depend on these conversations and what the cardinals see as the needs of the church at this moment.
Very interesting. Father Robert Sirico, we've really appreciated your time. Thank you so much.
Delighted to be with you. Thank you so much.
Well, as Francis Campbell mentioned there, amid the ceremony of the Pope's funeral, or just before it in fact, there have been diplomatic moves on the sidelines, some extraordinary photographs being released. Let's show you those. It is of President Trump and President Zelensky meeting inside St. Peter's Basilica ahead of Pope Francis's funeral. Those red damask chairs are close together, intent on deep conversation there. Later joined by President Macron of France and the British Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer too. One wonders if they helped get this meeting together. There had been word that President Zelensky may not be able to come because of security matters yesterday. He did turn up alongside his wife, in fact. But this, you know, one wonders if this is a very significant moment, and certainly we heard later from the White House communications person that was a very positive meeting. So let's bring in our correspondent Adam Parsons, who was in Vatican City watching the funeral. Speculation was there might be some sort of bilateral meeting, and there it was. But inside, extraordinarily, Adam, that famous basilica.
Yeah, they are remarkable images of the two of them sitting in that spectacular setting with apparently no one around them, and then just talking over a small table. I'm absolutely sure there were a lot of advisors around. Interesting, those images released from the Ukrainian side rather than the American side. I think the Ukrainians are keen to be seen as the nation that is prepared to go the extra step. Remember that it was the Ukrainians that signed up to the ceasefire, and then it was Russia that said, well, hold on, we've got this problem and this problem. And the Ukrainians throughout this process have frankly felt that Russia is getting a much better deal from America than they are. And Steve Witkoff, who has made so many visits to talk to Vladimir Putin, while the Ukrainians see that Donald Trump treated President Zelensky with an extraordinary amount of disrespect when they were in the White House. But nevertheless, could this be the precursor to a deal? Well, it wasn't the longest meeting ever, but it was certainly a meeting. Donald Trump has now left and is on his way to or aboard Air Force One, heading back to Washington. But at least this is a smoke signal, a sign that something has at least gone in the direction of a potential deal. Excuse me. But we just spoke to Michelle O'Neill, the First Minister of Northern Ireland. And I put it to her, well, what would that mean, you know, if on the day of his funeral, what would Pope Francis have made of this? And she laughed and said, well, wouldn't that be the most extraordinary legacy for a man who spoke so often of ending wars and bringing peace, if actually his funeral was the stage for discussions between these two nations who have been at loggerheads, but who may be the key to creating a peace settlement in Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia. And that would be another strand to a funeral service that I think went a long way to encapsulating Pope Francis, because Pope Francis was, of course, an 80-year-old man, a guy who'd been the Archbishop of Buenos Aires, who had spent so long ordained within the Catholic Church that he was a product of the Catholic Church. And certainly his service was framed by those traditions, by hundreds of years of papal funerals, by the liturgy, by the homilies. And yet within it there were lots of references to those more liberal, progressive ideals that he held so strong. The fact that within that homily was the expression, better to build bridges, not walls, an expression that Pope Francis used rather pointedly in the wake of Donald Trump talking about building that southern wall. There were references to his support for migrants, again something that Donald Trump won't have taken lightly, and I think quite a lot of reference to his loathing of wars. Now, these may sound to some people fairly normal, but within the context of a papal position which is so politically sensitive, they were seen as important, liberal, progressive steps, admired by some. For other people, they caused dismay. So he was a political figure. All popes are, to an extent, political figures. I think he was more overt than others have been. And and it's an enormous if a meeting here between two leaders, Messrs. Trump and Zelensky, as well as any other bilateral meetings they've had with Keir Starmer, Emmanuel Macron and others, but if that meeting, that small, brief meeting, could be any kind of precursor to a deal, I think Michelle O'Neill is right, that would be a fairly remarkable legacy for Pope to leave behind.
Just seeing pictures there from earlier of Prince William, who also paid his respects today, just ahead of that service, as many did. They seemed to walk the world leaders through St. Peter's Basilica quite unbelievably as well earlier. Well, I'm pleased to say we're joined by the Archbishop of York, Stephen Cotterill, who has just come from the service. I'll ask your overall impression in a moment, but first of all, we're talking about the fact that on the sidelines just before, President Trump and President Zelensky held a meeting, and we heard 250,000 people applaud when peace was mentioned, about the devastation of war. It was heartfelt by people.
Yes, I think one of the astonishing things about these occasions is you see the convening power of the church to bring people together, and of course Pope Francis, more than any other Christian leader, was someone who has done that in death as well as in life. And wouldn't it be a wonderful, wonderful thing if part of the legacy of today was at last a movement towards peace, the peace which Jesus prays for, the peace which was such a central theme of Pope Francis's ministry. It was a wonderful homily. I'm afraid I needed to read it in translation to fully understand it. But in the homily, it was said that one of the things Pope Francis often said was, we must build bridges, not barriers. And if that meeting today in the Basilica in St. Peter's, it was, I didn't see those images because I was sitting outside. I've just seen them on the television as I've arrived here, to see them sitting down in St. Peter's talking, and I pray and hope building a bridge of peace.
You needed Alistair Bruce's translation in your ear, I think, probably.
Yeah. No, I didn't have the benefit of that.
Yeah, I mean, this was really, one wondered if it would happen. And there we have, this intense conversation between the two of them. And yet we know that Trump was surrounded by those who support Zelensky, the Finnish leader, the French leader, the Polish as well, and the crowd applauding President Zelensky as they saw him coming down the steps of the Basilica. Support from Italy too in many places. But as you said, Pope Francis really did focus on trying to end the war in Ukraine and the war in Gaza as well. We know he called the only Catholic Church daily. It really was at the forefront of his mind.
It was, and in this Easter, well, we're still in the octave of Easter today, and on Easter Day, God, he's a tombstone rolling, barricade busting, apple cart overturning God. That's what the resurrection of Jesus Christ is all about. It's about the possibilities of new beginnings, that no situation is too dark and too despairing, that God cannot turn it around. And so that will be my prayer from today, seeing those images. And I invite people of prayer and people of goodwill to pray for peace, which is what Pope Francis did, though you have to make peace. That's the other, Jesus said, blessed are the peacemakers, not blessed are the peace lovers. Loving peace is relatively easy to do. Making it requires a commitment of will and purpose. And that's what lay behind Pope Francis's phone calls, his tireless work across the world, yes, of course, in Ukraine, but in so many other places of conflict, many forgotten places of conflict, where he would visit, he would pray, and he would witness to peace.
Do you learn from that effort?
Well, I think the whole world has got much to learn from Pope Francis. Several lines from the homily really struck me. First, that build bridges, not barriers. Also, God never tires of forgiving. That's another message our world needs to hear, particularly the kind of siloed echo chambers of social media where we hurl often abuse at one another and shout at one another. God never tires of forgiving. And perhaps actually for me, I thought almost the opening line of the homily was the one that really touched my heart, which was, human existence doesn't end in the tomb, it ends in the Father's house. And we commend this faithful servant of Jesus Christ, this man of peace, we commend him to God the Father.
Well, you talk of echoing. For us here, it echoed through the colonnades, it bounced off the rooftops. You know, the sound was unbelievable. For you sat there, what was the experience you had?
It was very humbling to be, I'm an Anglican, I'm a Archbishop in the Church of England. Just to be invited to be part of this is a huge honour. Then to have, a place of honour right up on the platform. I think I was 6th row back. So to be in the heart of the liturgy was very, very beautiful, and it was gloriously un-English. I don't think I remember at services like this in England people cheering quite like people did, and I love that bit at the end. I need to watch your coverage back later. I love that bit at the end where the coffin was all tilted towards the crowds and the crowds cheered. Oh, it was I was sorry, I'm close to tears now. I was close to tears at that moment because it was the great love that people have for St. Francis, and I suppose a love I have. I was saying to you the other day, one of the things that I think Pope Francis has achieved, simply through him being who God made him to be, is he poured out such love to people. And of course, it is in giving that we received. He received a lot of love back, and so many Anglican Christians and Methodists and Pentecostals and Christians from around the world, kind of in a funny way, thought, well, he's our Pope too, because we love him and because we see Jesus in him.
The other pictures you won't have seen will be the procession through the streets of Rome, the applause on every street corner, on every pavement as the Pope made its way through to his final resting place. Pictures there not showing us now. We know that the Cardinals will head over, I think, Alistair, tomorrow afternoon as part of another service. But your impressions, because you commentated on the funeral, the two of you.
No, I want to say to the Archbishop that I counted 3 tilts. There was the wonderful tilt when Pope Francis was shown to the faithful here and got the response that it did. He was tilted again before he was taken into St. John Lateran, again to the faithful who gathered. But perhaps most movingly of all, and I'd love to know why an icon can be so important, he was tilted towards the icon before he was taken to his tomb.
Well, that I think is the icon where he would always come and pray before and after his visits around the world, of which there were many. So I suppose he had a great devotion to Our Lady and perhaps to that particular icon. So that was a lovely touch. I didn't see that.
And to be there in a way representing the Church of England, it must seem so profound when it's been a very long journey for the churches. And Pope Francis, when he went to South Sudan with the former Archbishop of Canterbury, I mean, that was a major moment, wasn't it?
It is, and the ecumenical journey has been marked by gestures of goodwill. I mean, Michael Ramsey, one of my predecessors, Archbishop of York, as well as Archbishop of Canterbury, was given a ring. Justin Welby was given a crozier. All the primates of the Church of England, when we came to Rome only last year, were welcomed into the Vatican as if we were bishops of the Catholic Church, just like any other group of bishops who were coming to Rome. And certainly that trip to South Sudan was another one of those examples of, I think, Pope Francis as it were, anticipating that visible unity which isn't quite there yet by saying, well, we are already one in Christ. We're already one through our baptism. Let us live and act as if we are one. And he did say to me personally when I met him, then let the theologians and the bishops catch up. Because unity is something which I feel we need to reveal because we already have it. I don't want to underestimate the difficulties and the challenges, but I think sometimes it's been those prophetic ecumenical gestures which have said more than all the theological documents that are important as well. And I think Francis understood the power of the prophetic gesture, the power of a visit, the power of touch, and of course most of all the power of prayer. And therefore when I personally prayed with him, certainly when he prayed many times with Archbishop Justin, that was a sign of what the Church truly is on our journey towards that visible unity.
And if I may ask, there's a bit of unfinished business to the papacy of Francis. He started the Synod of Synodality and declared that for the next 3 years that was work that needed to be done. What does a Synod of Synodality mean, and why is it important for a church?
Well, it's a little presumptuous of me to comment on the Catholic Church in a way, so I offer this reflection with I hope proper humility, but I have found Pope Francis's way of rethinking and reimagining who we are as the Church through the image of synodality incredibly powerful for me as an Anglican, and I think for many Christians across the world, because what it says to me is the Church is not the place at which we have arrived. The Church is the people on the journey towards the destination. Now that actually is quite a profound change and potentially has big implications for the way that we treat each other. And I find that life-giving. So I hope that process goes on in the Catholic Church. I hope it furthers the ecumenical dialogue, but that is not for me to say.
Archbishop, it's been a real pleasure to have you up here. We appreciate you coming from the service straight to talk to us. Thank you very much indeed, Archbishop.
Thank you, every blessing.
Stephen Cottrell, thank you very much indeed. Well, we talked about Ukraine with that meeting today between Presidents Trump and Zelensky. We talked about Gaza, and even last Saturday night, a week ago, Pope Francis was on the phone to the Catholic Church in Gaza, as he has been throughout the war. So let's head now to another part of the Palestinian territories. I'm joined now by Pastor Munta Isaac, a Palestinian Christian pastor who joins us from Bethlehem on the West Bank. And clearly Pope Francis reached out, did he not, to the Palestinian people. So what are your thoughts today?
I'm grateful for his legacy, and I'm thankful that he showed us in example, not just in words, what it means to be a true follower of Christ, in humility, in care for the poor, in care for the oppressed, and in speaking truth to power. Certainly in Palestine, we sensed in a powerful way the compassion and mercy, the humanity and humility of Pope Francis, beginning with his famous visit in 2014 to Bethlehem, when he made sure to stop the car. It was not planned, next to the wall, and to say a prayer over the wall, touching it. And I felt then, I still feel that when he touched the wall, he touched the depth of our suffering. He said, I see you, I understand your pain, I understand what it means to be on the other side of the wall, as marginalized, as oppressed people. And then we saw his constant care to the people of Gaza. And I hope people understand what it means for him to make this daily call to the people of Gaza. This was not a political stunt. This was not just to show, hey, I care. He genuinely cared. He felt so close, especially to the Christian community trapped in the Catholic Church in Gaza, to the extent that he would call, care about the daily details of their lives. He was truly a leader who was close to his people, and he wouldn't allow even distance to keep him from shepherding his people. I loved what Cardinal Pizzapella, the Patriarch of Jerusalem, the Catholic Patriarch, said in giving tribute to Pope Francis, he said that Gaza represents what was at the heart of his pontificate. I love that because truly the way he conveyed care and compassion and cared for the justice of Gaza and called for a ceasefire is a microcosm of his ministry as a priest, as an archbishop, and then as a pope, as someone who genuinely was offended by the idea of war, was troubled by the presence of poor and marginalized in our world, and would see the calling of the church to do its best to eliminate poverty, to help the marginalized, and to speak truth to power.
Well, he called for an end to the war in Gaza, for the hostages too to be released, but he also reached across faiths, didn't he? Why would that have been so important to him?
I think he showed us the way also in that you need to always build bridges between people of different faiths. His ministry was at a very difficult time, especially for our region. The impact of religious violence was so strong to our region that it actually created a distance. And to be honest, many in the West responded to religious violence in the Middle East by emphasizing or using it for political purposes and to promote more polarization, as if there is a gap between people. He resented that. He made several visits to the Middle East. He met with Iraqi Muslim leaders. He met with several Muslim leaders in the region. One of the most important, I would say, contribution or the legacy of Pope Francis was the document he signed with Al-Azhar on human fraternity, challenging the notion of exclusivity and calling for unity between people of different faiths in terms as we are all human beings, equality under the same law. I think that was incredibly important, again, in a time when the response of many was polarization and stereotyping, maybe even dehumanizing other faiths. His approach was, no, I will come, I will visit, I will closer together, so that this was not